What do you get when three home health PTs in a business suit discuss real-world clinician problems? Welcome to Home Health Suit and Scrubs, where home health clinicians meet the business side of care. We tackle a variety of topics affecting home health clinicians, ranging from safety and efficiency best practices to clinical issues and even career development in home health. Check out our website at careandmotion.co to learn more. I'm Dan Haggerty, Chief Revenue Officer from In-Home Therapy and founder of Care in Motion. In each episode, I'm joined by my good friends and home health physical therapists, Dan Cotuccio, Lisa Thompson, and Brendan Kirby. All right, folks, ready for part two of our discussion with Tracy Riddell, the PTA who flipped the script? Last week, we spent a lot of time with our favorite PTA challenging Dan and Brendan on how assistants can best communicate with their supervising therapists to ensure our patients get the best plan of care. Today, we'll tackle a few new topics, like explaining to a patient the difference in care between an assistant and a therapist, or how to handle a PTA who isn't following the plan of care. But right off the bat, we're going to jump back in and start with Tracy pressing Dan and Brendan with how to handle a PT who unnecessarily recommends continuing care for a patient who should probably be discharged from home health. I interrupted you, but I'm glad I did. But what were you going to ask?
My question is let's say you are my PT and I tell you that, so-and-so patient has met their goals, they're not homebound, but they really, really like me and they want me to keep coming, but I know what the homebound law states and then you go see the patient and, how do you deal with the peer pressure of the patient or the family pressure to keep a patient on that is not technically homebound? Because I do get a lot of complaints from PTAs that they think the patient is ready to be discharged. They communicate to the PT that they're ready for discharge and they assume they're going to be discharged. It's not communicated to them that they changed it to a reassessment and extended them 3 weeks. And now they feel like they're writing, against homebound status.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I think about is, it is just so important to have the discharge talk every day, every time you're there. Starting them at day one, because you know how this goes. It's something that you have to learn, but it's something that I recommend learning, early on, because, you're with a patient for 3, 4, 5 weeks. They start to love you. They start to, know more about your personal life. And then one day you come in hey, guess what? Tracy's going to discharge you. They're like, wait, what? When did all this happen? So I think that's the first most important thing to make sure we're doing to just prepare. Listen, you're doing well. I'm anticipating in the next 2 weeks that you're going to be on track to meet your goals. Remember, this is a temporary, having all those uncomfortable but very necessary conversations, because they are hard conversations to have, but we have to have those conversations. And so I think it starts with the RPT who goes in on day one, and then the PTA on day two who says, all right, it looks like Dan said probably 4-ish weeks, that's on a week-to-week basis. We'll see how your progress is going, because it can change, it can vary, but that's right. the what we're looking towards,
Yeah, absolutely. And I go ahead. Sorry.
No, to piggyback off Dan, I was just going to say the same exact thing. It's every session, but then also I think it's making sure that they understand our place in the continuum of care, right? Like, so to make sure that they understand home health, as he briefly said, it's a temporary thing. It's not permanent. As much as we love our patients, just like they love us, we want to be there forever. It's not likely. At the end of the day, we've seen all the changes over the years. Dan, you've been in this a little bit longer than I have, and even the years that I've been in it, you see the episodes, you see the visit numbers, you see everything getting quicker and quicker, shorter and shorter. So I think, being able to really express to them, hey, and having a unified goal with each visit, right? Being, hey, what are we going to accomplish today? So that at the end of, those 5, 6, 7, however many visits you're in with the patient, you're able to say, hey, look at everything we accomplished though. Right. You couldn't even do this. You couldn't do this. But now you're, walking up 13 steps. You're getting in and out of the 4 steps of your house. You're getting in and out of your car by yourself. Like all these things. And I think sometimes patients just need to have that visual or that understanding and saying, hey, I can do it now. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure that they understand that we are a stepping stone for them to get back to their normal life, but we are not the stepping stone. That there's still another point. There's outpatient or there's Part B services depending on where depending on where they fall with stuff. So I think having clear communication with them and expressing that, like I said, having a unified goal every visit, and then just kind of giving them updates throughout and expressing where they are, and that we're a temporary service, I think really helps to not have it be a surprise all of a sudden. Oh, Dane's discharging me. What the
No,
heck?
I was kind of speaking more to it being a surprise for the PTA who has done the discharge planning at each visit and is planning to discharge, and then the PT goes in and changes it to a reassessment, but the PTA may homebound. And so, but we're continuing, and then the PTA may feel like they're documenting against homebound status. That's what my original question being.
I see. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's fine.
I went off his lead.
What you're saying is very, very important that we are discharge planning at each visit. But, I do see scenarios where, the PTA communicates to the PT, so-and-so is ready for discharge. And then they find out that a reassessment was thrown at them and there's visits added to their calendar. So how do you deal with a patient or a family member who's kind of fighting that with you? Like, oh, well, Tracy said it was my last day, but I want more. I'm going to call the doctor. I want to make sure because my Humana says I can have this, things like that. Like, how do you deal with that pressure?
I mean, I think that number one, I mean, we have to be a unified team. If I'm working with a PTA, we have to be seeing eye to eye and kind of have that preparatory conversation prior. But I'm a big rule follower. And I really blame insurance because we have rules, and this is where I have to make it like black and white. Is listen, insurance is not going to allow further services because you are now able to get out a little bit into the community, and you're doing it more and more, which is a great thing. We're celebrating that, but there is outpatient. So I'm really going to sell the outpatient. I'm really going to sell the Med B mobile home PT if they're not agreeable with outpatient. But I really don't like to dance with the idea of not following the insurance rules.
I love that.
I think for me, the only time I'll change is if something significant happened between that visit that you had and the visit that I'm making, right? And I'm right there with Dan. There's this, I need to have that talk with you prior to walking into this visit, knowing this is what you're seeing, ABC, and if I go in and I see ABC too, hey, it's a done deal. Like, we got to move on. We got to get you to outpatient or to the next step and celebrate what you were able to accomplish with us in home care. But I mean, no matter how sweet they are, and no matter whether they gave you coffee and cookies every visit, no matter whatever it may be, right? I think long story short, you have to just be able to be comfortable and confident in that degree that you've earned, right? And be able to really express to them, hey, I've been practicing for, this amount of years. I have my doctorate. And then, based on, insurance and guidelines and everything else, you're ready. And just, like Dan said, showcase outpatient, showcase the reason why and rationale. And now, I mean, it's a person. You're not going to get every person to buy into that. But I think if you and as a PT and a PTA are on the same page and continue with that same message, and you're strong with that message, and there's no, well, maybe, as long as there's no maybe, I think it's actually the wording which you use. And Dan, I think you can probably speak to this too. Like, I mean, I think there's times if I even give a little bit, they're going to take the whole thing, right? So I have to make sure I'm very firm and saying, hey, you know what? This is our last visit today. I appreciate everything you've been able to accomplish. I know we didn't get everything done, but I think you're ready to start outpatient next week. And today's Friday. Call outpatient. Let's get them set up for Monday, Tuesday, and good luck. And prior to that, right, we should be, as PTs and PTAs, encouraging them to get the script from the doctor, or helping them get the script from the doctor while we're there, and making sure they have that set up so that when it's like, hey, you already got outpatient set up for next Monday. We're ready to roll. And so there's no kind of turning back at that point in time. It's just moving forward. So
as the non-clinical guy here,
and
I would say the short answer to your question, Tracy, would be that Brendan and Dan would not put you in a position to be documenting against homebound status.
Pretty much.
Sounds like you have to have a couple of tough conversations.
I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, too? I mean, it obviously speaks to the whole knock, the form that so that it's not a surprise we're giving this form, as a preparation. But also, I have to say, I mean, on paper, this is always so much easier to talk about. In real life, man, it is a skill, and it can be really, really difficult. You know this. You all know this. It can be really difficult having these conversations with patients and their families who are demanding and who are not in agreement. And I have to say that on day one, I mean, I really like to say, like, I want this to be a mutual, ideally, this is going to be a mutual agreement that you are ready for discharge at that point, Is it always mutual? No, but I really, really, really try to get to that point where they're being prepared for it, and you're having those. Because when I was a younger therapist, I have to say, it was not as easy to have these difficult conversations. I was like, okay, I guess I'll stay. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, what do I say? But as you get older, you just realize you can't sugarcoat things. You have to go directly to the conversation, have that courageous conversation like you do with leadership too, and just because otherwise you're dancing around, beating around the bush, and it makes it harder.
Well, and to go off that too, I mean, Dan, how many times have you seen the same patient? Like, I mean,
like
the same
Rose?
patient
Back a different
they come back and they want you back, right? And so the thing is this:
I feel like you see Rose all the time, Dan. I don't get it.
I am on 17 certification periods with her again. Thank you.
I feel an audit coming on. I feel an audit. I'm just,
but you're absolutely right, though. I mean, we do.
I think that's my point, is that there's a strong chance this patient may come back to you for one reason or another, right? And just saying, hey, in the time that we've had together right now, I feel you are at your strongest. You're doing your best that I've seen, in the time that we've had to work together. And being a young clinician or a newer clinician, you just have to really, showcase what they've accomplished, right? And stand by that. And, and no matter what's said, just be firm, right? Like I said, you can't waver one way or the other, because otherwise it's going to cause indecisiveness. It's going to cause you to question. It's going to cause confusion with your PTA. It's going to cause your PTA to feel, hey, I'm documenting and I shouldn't be. This isn't true anymore. So,
and that trust relationship between PT and PTA is going to be really challenged if, like, you're saying they're ready for discharge and the PT is like, surprise, there's 8 more visits. It's just not a good feel.
Correct.
How do you guys sort of explain to your patient the difference in care that they're going to get between a PT and a PTA? I've always, we've got certain states that we work in where they might not allow assistance, or certain insurance companies might not allow assistance. And I've always heard that, assistance sort of like from I need to word this properly to not piss off Dan and Brendan, but I've always heard that a PTA visit is potentially, a little bit better. I don't know.
I'm going back on vacation. I'll talk to you guys later.
Anyways, tune in next time for the next podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Hopefully Lisa's back. It's going to be Dan and Lisa now. I'm just kidding.
Maybe that's just what we're supposed to say. No, I don't know.
I will say, admittedly, right? I would agree with that, right? So think about this, and at the end of the day, I think as a PT, we are juggling many, many things. Right? Not that a PTA isn't, but I think there's a lot more things that we're thinking about from day one about the patient. So, we're trying to get as many assessments and as much information in that initial evaluation, right? We're trying to get as much information for that PTA. I think as a PTA, we're trying to set you up for success, and you have that one goal every time. Hey, this is what we're working on first. We're going to start with some strengthening. When we're transitioning to balance, and we're transitioning to, stairs, I think you have a set game plan moving in. But I would say, admittedly, I feel my PTA's, visits are extremely valuable. I feel that they actually might have the best understanding in the PT-PTA relationship with the patient, because they're there more than what I was, right? And I mean, Tracy, you said 30 days, so Dan, you were just saying about, having, multiple PTAs. If I haven't seen a patient in over a month, it's going to be hard for me to remember what that patient, unless there's something very, very specific that stood out to them. So that's where I'm really going to be dependent upon you and our conversations and our, back and forth to make sure that I know what's happening when I step through that door on that, 28th day or 27th day and say, hey, Tracy said you're doing really good. This is what's happening. Boom, boom, boom. Plus, it helps to build and show that, strong relationship of the team between us.
Yep.
If I can say, hey, Tracy said this, this, and this, and it lines up, right? If I'm like, yeah, what have you been, Tracy, been doing, huh? People are like, do you not know? Like, then that just kind of destroys it. So I would say, no, Haggerty, you're accurate. I would say a PTA visit can be more valuable than a PT, especially depending on the circumstances. So
This guy knows things. He knows some things.
he tries to be clinical sometimes,
I'm just the sales guy. I don't know.
Clinical.
I love that.
Tracy, any other? I was impressed. I see you looking down. I feel like you might have I feel like you have a list of questions that you've got that you didn't get to. Okay.
I don't have a list of questions.
She was flipping the script. I loved it. It's like
I got your
I think you asked.
and I was just finishing up dinner, so I came in here. So no.
Nice.
Well,
you asked great questions. Absolutely, it's definitely a good conversation for sure.
Yeah, I think that the only thing, and I almost wonder if this is its own unique episode. We always say that when we get through some of this stuff, but it's like, Dan, you said something at the very beginning about, you've got, I don't know what EMR it is, but you mentioned like snapshots, but I know you've got EMR notes, you've got text messages, you've got Teams chats, you've got Tiger text. And it's just like, it's almost like there's so many ways to communicate that there's no good way to communicate, because you never know how what's the best way to communicate when you're a team trying to coordinate care.
That's where, I specifically would go up with my PTA and say, listen, do you want to do Teams chats on our patients, or do you want to do Tiger text? What do you prefer? Or do you want a phone call for 45 minutes on a Friday at 2:30 p.m. every Friday? You know what I mean? Because that way you figure it out per team,
right?
What works, I think.
Yeah, could be different depending on each person.
I think the other thing is too, there's things that you want to be stated in documentation in certain parts, right? Like in your actual documents, and there's things that need to be said outside, like, hey, the person's a hoarder. Yes, sometimes you do say those things, like the house is messy and stuff, but there's certain things that you want the PTA to know. So I think different channels demand certain criteria, you know what I mean? So you do have to use sometimes multiple channels to communicate, and that can make it tricky or difficult, but that's just the honest truth, is that there's certain things that you want to be in, legal in the documents that is documented, and there's certain things that you want to have everybody on the team aware of, but maybe it shouldn't be stated because that's a public record for the patient to think about. So just a food for thought for people as you are, doing these things. Just think about that a little bit. So
I do have a question regarding that. So in full honesty, so if you have your 10-15 minute chat with your PTA, let's say you have 3 or 4 PTAs regarding your patients, do you ever go back and actually read their documents from their follow-up visit notes?
I do. I'm just going to say I do, because I want to, number one, I want to, ideally, and again, I have not dealt with 4 at one time, so that's different. But if I have had communication like every week with the PTA about their progress, then I'm not going to probably read it, because we've had the conversation as I'm leading up to discharge. But if it's been, some of those weeks where it's just like crazy and we didn't get the communication we wanted to, I am going to, because I want to see how far they were walking last visit, how much assistance were they needing, you know what I mean? So I want to get at least a blurb of information. Yeah.
I think even when I was, managing multiple, I would still, depend on my conversations with them to have a good understanding of what's happening. But before I would step into the house, I'm looking at the last visit or two, even as a quick refresher right before I walk in, and make sure I know, hey, last visit you walked 75 feet. That's awesome. Oh, you did it outside as well with the cane and everything. Yeah. Like we were using a walker when we first came in, like things like that. So I mean, for me, that's why, I know we've talked about documentation being so important, but as a PTA, to really put everything in, because, sometimes PTs do need that last minute reminder, or, Dan, as you were saying, you were worried about having so many patients. That can be that little refresher for you to be like, hey, oh, I do remember this patient, right? That's
Right.
the patient that had the CVA, or that's the patient that had this, or that. And it all
Yep.
comes from the PTA documentation. So I will admittedly say I probably don't read all the notes, every single one, but I would say a majority of the ones, especially the most recent ones before leading up to where I'm stepping in, as long as I've had clear communication, I am. Now, if we aren't communicating, then that is going to require me to be reading a lot more to make sure I know what's
Right.
happening, and be able to keep tabs on them. Because I think the one thing that has been brought up or more into light lately, and I'll leave it on this, is that, PTs and PTAs, even though we have a relationship, you're also still working underneath our license to some extent,
Mhm.
right? And that's an extension. And I think there was a big case recently about this and everything else. But you have to really, you know, trust the person that's your PTA and everything else. And that's where, the things that we've said on this entire episode about having, good communication, having good understanding, having a great relationship, having clear communication is going to be huge. Because, if Tracy, you are my PTA and you're never talking to me, how do you think I'm going to feel if something happens and then, guess who else is affected by that? Not just you,
Right.
but, my license and everything else. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
again, it's just another important thing to note is that when you are accepting, PTAs, you need to, be paying attention, for your own well-being as your license. This is your livelihood as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where you read a document and you said my PTA is not following the plan of care? And if you did, what did you do?
Is that just from me or Dan?
Either one.
I've had
Just
to have communication
curious.
with store. I mean, yes, and I've had to have communication. Like I thought, yeah, part of the original plan was not that. Like, let's make sure we're not doing that until we like make sure that they're ready for
And
that, and just have the communication.
Right.
Just nip it
I
in the
think
bud.
I've done that, but then also I've given them a visit or two to see if things change. But if not, then I've tried to take that patient back myself, even though I might have not supposed to, or just to make sure that we're going in the right direction again.
Yeah.
Just because at the end of the day, we're talking about humans. We're talking about living beings that we want to see get better and progress and go back to independent lives. So it's important to make sure that we're getting them to be progressing.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and hopefully I don't get like burned at the stake by Brendan and Dan and Lisa when she gets back. But I love the interaction and the questions, Tracy. I think you've I think brought a lot of different perspectives to this. I know there's going to be a lot of folks out there that can relate, and I think obviously at the end of the day, the thing that we come back to in almost every single episode is communication and just figuring out the best way to make that happen. So I really want to thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And Tracy is also, by the way, a customer of Care in Motions and a consumer of the Care in Motion podcast. So I hope that all of you have listened to this, are subscribing to it wherever you get your podcasts, and you are visiting careinmotion.co to check out the stuff that we have there for you. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you back next week. See you guys.